Welcome to Human Experience, a podcast about life, sharing experiences, and how to make yourself feel better. Men need to talk more about their well-being, so let's make a start.
Welcome everybody to episode 2 of Human Experience. This week we're going to be talking about giving voice to your feelings, which is something Chris and I touched on last week, which is not a very easy thing to do for any men struggling with mental health. I'll just give you a quick overview of some of the topics we're going to touch on in this podcast episode. The first one's going to be around fear of sharing, so why men fear actually speaking about this, or certainly I'll rephrase that. Chris and I had that fear of, giving voice to this. We want to discuss, certainly from my point of view, how I felt like it was a sign of weakness. Again, we'd like to touch on this week who you can talk to, so the different options available to actually getting this out there, making yourself feel better, and then where help can be found. So what options and avenues have you got, where to turn, either friends, family, or people in the professional industry. So that's a snapshot of what we've got for you. Hopefully you'll enjoy this episode and get a lot of benefit from it, and it can help push your life forward. So, Chris, you've been doing some insights, looking at some insights in this topic for us.
Yeah, been doing a bit of research, seeing what's out there. I think, we covered it briefly last week, but one of the main issues around men's mental health from what we've experienced and what we've seen and read about is not being able to talk up about it, or people not feeling like they can talk about it and looking for other avenues out of it, whether that's substance abuse or, ultimately taking your own life, which we talked about again last week. And in terms of like the psychology behind it is a known sort of subject in terms of around the different traits and norms and stereotypes that are in society around the two different genders. The stats, again, we talked about last week, showed that women are more likely to come forward and talk and seek medical professional help about how they're feeling in their mental health, whereas men aren't so much up there. And it ties into something called social role theory, which I'm not going to profess to know loads about or go into great detail, but that talks a lot about male gender, stresses of male gender, and there's certain aspects of that if, especially the more masculine somebody is, and if they're sticking to that really rigidly, that role of being the man, being masculine, it's been shown to have negative impacts on mental health because they feel less, or they are less likely to seek help. It's around just, it conflicts with so many things about being masculine, like showing sort of a weakness or being sensitive, all that kind of stuff. And I know it from my growing up, Stu, and you do, like, just especially like round your mates and all that. You don't want to show weakness because as a kid, especially, you get pounced on for that kind of stuff, don't you? And I guess that gets bred inside you.
Yep, I agree.
So, and then I'll just throw one more technical term out there. So it's called normative male alexithymia. So there's a mouthful for you, but that refers to the fact that traditional masculine roles, the way we're socialized around that, makes many men be sort of afraid to come forward, like what I'm saying. So that is like a sort of a clinical term for it, and it kind of means people don't feel like they're allowed to express how they're feeling, and that puts a lot of us off even broaching that subject. And definitely can vouch for that from my own personal experiences.
Yeah, definitely. So again, a lot of information there where it's just how we are wanting to really break down some of those barriers and walls, and hopefully as we go through this episode, we'll help bring you along that journey as well with us. Certainly from my point of view, from my own experience, the challenge that I had really about talking about it were couple-fold really. First time I was thinking about, I need to tell someone about this, it was what do I say? Am I going to be viewed as weak, soft? If it came out in my work environment life, are opportunities not going to get put my way because people think that I'm not going to be able to handle the stress or the pressure? And then obviously that goes on into then I've got kids and family? Why am I feeling like this when everything's going good for me and should be going good? Are people going to think that, am I going to upset my wife, parents, thinking that, it's something someone else has done or is doing, etc. So, when I first tried to explain it, those were the sort of thoughts that went off in my head. But as my anxiety grew because I didn't speak about it, it suddenly then turned into I couldn't physically find the words to explain it. So when I was dealing with something that's called depersonalization, it was how do I explain what's going on between my ears to someone else? Like how do I explain this without, in my mind, what was going on at the time, feeling that someone's going to be like, right, we need to have this guy committed because we don't have a clue where he's coming from.
You probably couldn't even explain that to yourself, let alone trying to speak to somebody next year and tell
Totally.
them,
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And it once you sort of said, once I said one thing and I got it out there, the fact that I was feeling anxious, I was struggling with it, it sort of just fell out of a wave of emotion like it just sort of came out. Still, it was still hard for me to explain it, but I felt so much more comfortable that I had ears to talk to, which then obviously moved on into me being able to try and speak to professionals and things like that, and looking at different avenues of where I could turn to discuss it with people outside my friends, family circle, my wife, and things like that.
yeah. And I think that'll be a common theme right across our sort of age group and our kind of like backgrounds and even beyond that. I think especially with you, you're the man of the house, aren't you? You've got your kids, you've got the wife, everything like that. So that with that comes that sort of pressure of being like the masculine and always being able to show that you're tough and you can handle it. So that just, I think sometimes we're sort of crippled under the weight of that expectation and it kind of stops you from coming forward with those feelings. Certainly from my perspective as well, is just around exactly what you said. Like, I suppose I've got so good at not talking about how I feel that I don't know how to then change that. Like, how do you start that conversation when everybody expects you not to be feeling like that, to then be like, actually, I'm not all right. Like that, I don't know. I struggle to get past that. I don't know what you think.
Yeah, I do as well, and it's sort of like different roles and responsibilities as we are as humans. It sort of breeds that into certain things, like you expect the man at the top to be able to take all the pressure, but everybody's a human being. Like you've never heard of, or certainly I've never heard of like prime minister, presidents being like, "Oh, I'm riddled with anxiety," sort of thing. But everyone's a human. Everyone will get hit by stuff like this in the same way. It's just for the men that are out there like voicing that. But certainly from my experience in my professional life, I did feel like that because I was a manager at work and working hard to provide for my family and kids, and I was thinking like, how are you supposed to manage anyone else when you're trying to support yourself and stuff like that? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely. But just think about it. It's so much easier when you're outside looking in on somebody else living the life like that. You just want to shake them and say, why didn't you talk to me sooner about it and all that kind of stuff. Like, it's strange that it's so easy to kind of give the advice, but to take the advice is just, it's different when it's, the stakes are higher when it's yourself. And that's an interesting challenge.
Definitely. Yeah, it is. I mean, some of the things we were just talking on then, like around the male upbringing, so to speak. Like, there are sayings that I wrote down earlier that I can remember saying myself, and I can remember having said to me that sort of hit home. So one of them I can remember being saying to me as I were a kid from friends or stuff is like, "Stop crying, you girl."
Yeah.
And it's like, well, that is a saying there where it's just like, man up.
Yeah, I was just about to say.
Which were another saying that I heard. And yeah, so stop crying, you girl, man up. Those sort of sayings that are inbred in young lads growing up, and whether it be from friends or older brothers, siblings, whatever. But as well, like the stereotypes in movies, like you'd never see the action hero having any kind of mental health or out like that, would you?
Oh no, you're never going to see
It won't be
Stallone.
it. I can't think of a film.
Stallone start bawling his eyes out in Rocky. Well, he does actually, doesn't he? I think at one point he starts crying. That's maybe not a good example, but I know what you mean. It's like drilled into you from every angle as a kid, and I think like the worst thing about, or one of the self-fulfilling kind of prophecy side of this thing is that our dads and their generation are probably worse than us. So we're learning from people that just don't show any, like men in our lives that don't show any emotion themselves. And for as many generations as that goes on, people, it just reinforces the whole behaviour, doesn't it?
Yeah. Like, we both came from very loving backgrounds with loving parents and loving friends, caring friends. But it would just, I can't remember like seeing the generation before us in any kind of like, there will have been obviously, but any kind of like mental health or anything like that. Obviously there will have been, but whether it were kept in back then, because it's obviously a lot more out there in society today. But and that was another thing, what made it so difficult for me to speak up about it, because anyone that had been before me, my friends or family, had never leaned on me for that. So it was as if I was the first one. And I was like, when it was first happening, I was like, well, what's wrong with me? Why is this happening to me and nobody else? Which again, what a difficult thing to voice.
Yeah, I think luckily we're living in a time now where it becomes more normal to talk about these things. Hence why we're starting a podcast on it. I'd have been embarrassed to talk about this stuff like we are now 10, 15 years ago. So it's good that it's going in the right direction, but suicides and mental health issues are going upwards. So we're obviously not collectively still doing it the way we should. And I'm as guilty as the next man for not talking about my feelings.
Yeah. And, for me, when I've tried to strip away the layers of what it boiled down to, were ultimately my ego that I had, of the image that I have of me. Do you know what I mean? So in my head, I was mid-30s guy, had everything good going for him. Came from good family, couldn't admit that I was suffering with these mental health thoughts and anxiety, because it had somehow shown weakness, and I couldn't allow anyone to think I was been weak, or I couldn't handle it, or I couldn't handle the pressure, and I wasn't up for the task. Like, none of those things would allow me to break that stereotype and speak.
Yeah, I suppose it's like we've created we're a character in a movie that we've created, haven't we? And you spend so long investing in building the character that you are, that when something comes in from left field and kind of like goes against the person you thought you were, it's easier sometimes, well, a lot of the time, to just like turn a blind eye to that and just continue wearing that mask day to day and just grinning and bearing it and just pretending like you're not having those feelings. But and again, when I was doing some research, the psychologists and that were talking about, if your default kind of coping mechanism is to bottle things up and not talk about it, sooner or later that has to come out somewhere. It doesn't, that's, you can't destroy energy. That's like a law of physics, and negativity is an energy. So if you're not doing anything with that and you're just sort of storing it up, that has to come out somewhere, and it could come out, in a different type of illness, or all sorts of different things could come out. You could start having issues with anger management, substance abuse, all that kind of stuff. It has to come out somewhere. So I think what we're trying to say is that it's healthier coming out by talking to that about somebody that cares about you, you care about them, or to a professional, rather than letting it come to more destructive type things that, again, we've all seen the programs on TV. We've probably know somebody that's gone down that route, and it's like your life gets a momentum, and if it starts going too fast, that momentum becomes really hard to turn around. So the earlier you do it, the better.
That's actually a nice segue to the next point that I had, was regarding to the knock-on impacts of not, discussing your feelings, and certainly from my point of view, anger, frustration are things that I've dealt with for a lot of years as well. And for a lot of years, I just put it down to like a term from where from is like having a short fuse or easily irritated. He's got no patience. I remember hearing that a lot. But really, when now, now I know that I'm dealing with anxiety, that is the root cause of it. So, a story for you. I can remember once being sat in my car with my wife, and I was feeling extreme, like I had a bout of anxiety coming on. I could feel it. And we'd been and got like a McDonald's or KFC. I can't remember which one it was. And we're getting in the car, and I opened my drinks cup and it would not open. And that were like the final straw of this anxiety building up, and it just pounced out of me. And I was just like, let everything out on this drink cup holder that, I must have looked like an absolute crazy person. But so we left, drove off with our food, and I'd had a shouting match with this drinks cup holder. And, my wife probably thought, well, he's got like anger issues. And then, when we talked about it later after all this came out, it was easy to recognise that, I was having an anxiety attack right then, but I didn't want to tell anybody. I just wanted to keep it to myself. And so my meter, if you'd like, of frustrations, anger, etc., were like at a 9, and I was trying to keep it together. Then that little thing that's like a 1, which you'd go, why would someone lose the rag at that? It's a nothing. That just tipped me to that 10, because I was trying to bottle everything up inside and keep a lid on it. And then all of a sudden, just one thing dropped out, and it was like, right, the lid's off now, it's coming.
Yeah, Hulk's coming out. Hulk smash. Yeah.
And I find, sorry mate, I would say that I find that as like the real negative bit of my anxiety is not, or certainly to my feeling, it's not necessarily sometimes how it impacts me, but when I don't talk about it, it's how then it can impact everyone else around me, because I'm bottling it in.
Do you know as well, like, do you ever get it where I can almost feel it coming on, like if you just woke up in a sort of bad mood, or you're stressing about stuff, like even on the weekend you've had a tough week at work or whatever, and sometimes you just get that feeling early doors where you're just like, I just can't put my finger on it, but I'm not in a good mood. And you're almost like, why can't I just shake myself out of this? And in the end, I often don't do that, and I just let it build and build and build, and then I end up having a massive argument with the wife or something, and it's all because how, like, it could be something totally, you're almost telling yourself when you're having, an argument sort of coming, and you're like, I'm not even bothered about this thing that I'm arguing about, because my whole mindset for that day is just pissed off or down or whatever. It just bleeds out into the rest of the year, and you end up sucking other people into that just because of the way you're feeling. And I feel that's an important reminder that you just you don't know what is happening. Like, me and you are looking at each other right now. I don't really know what's going on in your head, same as you don't know what's going on in my head. Like, and that's, we all live a really complex story in our own heads, don't we? And as much as we're trying to encourage people out there who are listening to open up about their own feelings, ask your friends, ask your mates, ask your brothers, like, how are they doing? How are they feeling? Because actually, I might not want to come forward with my feelings, but if one of my mates sat me down and she went, right, Chris, you don't look well, or I can tell something's up, you just talk to me about it, I'd feel much more, somebody had invited me to share that, and I'd probably open up better than if I had to, like, start that conversation.
Yeah, totally. 100%, sometimes I personally, sometimes I do struggle with if people ask me if I'm all right, and I give a yep. But, the wife instantly tells straight away that it's a no, you're not. And but as soon as I let that out, as soon as I go, you're right, I'm not, this is what I'm anxious about, or this is what I'm thinking about, the entire atmosphere and mood and everything around me just changes for the better. There's not been a time when I've given voice to it that it's stuck as bad as what it was. I'm not saying it goes away, but it certainly gets better.
It's like they say, problem shared's a problem halved, and I think that's so true. And that, I think bottling up, I don't know the exact definitions of all these terms we're using, but depression for me is a very isolating feeling. So like I think you become more depressed the more isolated you feel, and you become isolated by not being able to share stuff with other people. So I think you run the risk of being depressed, feeling as though you've got nowhere to turn. Whereas what you're saying is, as soon as you opened up about that, a lot of that sort of weight lifted up off you, and you kind of 1 foot through the door of feeling better by just you've literally not taken any action other than just voiced your feelings to somebody else. And I think that's a powerful first step that everybody could take, like today, to start making themselves feel better, just to open up that conversation.
Definitely. And some points that I want to touch off, and I'll start now. Like, that can be a friend, a partner, parent, but there is also support out there. If you feel like talking to a stranger is the best first step, then the NHS have got a mental health helpline. Your GPs are available for support. I personally went and saw my GP, and they put me in touch with a place called Turning Point, where they offer over the phone support, or you can go in for like a group session, or you can wait and get a face-to-face one-on-one session. So they're just some of the things that I've done that I just wanted to call out. That we talk about voicing feelings, and yes, it was right for me to talk to people that I know, but that might not be the same case for everybody. But there is others. There is help out there, and obviously we'll link some of these in the description below.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's an important point. Like, there's loads of different things you can do, and we talked previously about our different personality types, Stu, and where I've felt like this in the past, I've tried to find ways that I could personally sort of do myself that would make myself feel better. If I wasn't feeling right to talk to somebody else. So one of those was I started a journal. Just on, I'd read that it'd be useful just doing. I almost didn't know what I was going to write, and I just thought I'm just going to write down exactly how I'm feeling right now. And it was really sort of therapeutic just to try and, because at the time, I didn't really know how I was feeling or why I was feeling that way, and just to try and put words to it and explain it to yourself. And you almost look at it, and sometimes you'd look at it on paper and you'd be like, why am I bothered so much about that? I'd be like, it might be a mistake that I'd made 20 years ago or 15 years ago that I'm still not fully let go of right now. And I'm like, why am I letting that thing that happened so long ago when I was a different person like affect my present moment? And you can almost just move on from it. As soon as you've written it down, you're like, actually, that's nothing. What am I bothered about? You can, not with all things like, but just particular things like that. So that if you're not ready to talk to anybody about it, try writing it down to yourself and have that conversation with yourself.
Yeah, I can relate to that. Like, I were diarising what I was thinking about and how I were feeling for a few weeks. And what I noticed is, like, when it was stuff like health anxiety that I was suffering with, like, and I'd be saying, oh, you're having a heart attack, or something's wrong, you're not well. I went back to it like 2 weeks later and realised that I'd just been lying to myself. I just made up this fantasy world that weren't true. But again, like, I did feel so much better when I just writ it on paper. I could just look at it and go, right, it's almost like I took it out put it in a little envelope and posted it onto that bit of paper.
Yeah.
And it would just, just a good way to get it out.
I think there's almost this, well, there is a step before that, isn't there, where you just got to look yourself in the mirror and just admit that something's not quite right with you, or like you've got an issue. Do you know? It's so easy. There's so many distractions in life, like your mobile phone, social media, TV, drinking, eating. There's so many distractions that we can kind of it's easier to do that distraction than it is to just look deep inside and just say, actually, I don't feel right now. And it's okay not to know why, but just to admit that first. Nobody is 100% smiley happy every single day. And nobody, especially men, for what we're talking about, should feel like they have to carry the weight of the world on their shoulders. It's okay to not be okay, I think. And that is probably step one, just to admit that and accept that. And then you can move forward from that point.
Yeah, definitely. I couldn't agree more. I think, like, admitting it to yourself is definitely step one, 100%. And I guess another big thing that you and I know are wanting to create with this is like a community. So where we can be here for listeners and you guys can be there for each other as well, where we can share experiences. And if we're the first people that you want to open up and share to, then we're more than happy to listen and help and do anything we can to point you in the right direction and, support you.
Yeah, and like you've already said, we'll share resources in the show notes. Because I think we're going to say every episode we're not professionals. We're literally just two guys who want to start a podcast and help other people and ourselves. So if this is your first kind of footstep in the right direction, we're more than happy to help with that. And you can contact us through our social media. Got a YouTube channel, Twitter, Facebook. Just get in touch and we'll happily start that conversation with you and point you in the right direction. So I think, Stu, in terms of where you're at now, then in your life, are you 100% comfortable now in talking to other people where you're not feeling right, or do you still see the old patterns coming back?
So I'm comfortable, I'd say 95% of the time. There'll be 5% of the time, and that's mainly because I'm not sure if I'm annoyed, restless, or I'm not sure that it is anxiety at the time when I first wake up, or so to speak, or when I'm first in that mood. I'm like, it's not until I actually go to do something like meditate or just go have 5 minutes on my own when I try and get to the root cause of what's going on. And a lot of the times I can walk it back to something that I'm either anxious about or some thought that I've got coming up. Could be certain days of the week when you've got certain tasks to do, or something's coming up that you're not a fan of. Could be anything. Could be people like trip to the dentist, for example, anything like that. So 95% of the time I know fully exactly what it is, and I'm happy to share that. And then 5% of the time I would say I could be getting it confused with another emotion or another feeling, so to speak. But I fully recognise that. I mean, we're here talking about this now because we want to help as many people as we can, but I fully accept that anxiety is just a part of my life. It's just a human emotion. If I thought at first then you were going to say to me, are you 100% anxiety free? That's what I thought your question were going to be. So I had my answer built up for that, and then you twisted it at the end, took me off guard. But yeah, so again, one thing that I would say to anyone suffering with this is it is temporary. You can definitely get better and get your life back to what it was, but anxiety is something that's always going to be around in all of us because it's just part of who we are.
Exactly, it's part of our DNA and evolution. If you read up on it, it kept us alive back in the days when there was saber-toothed tigers running around ready to kill us and that. So it is useful, channeled in the right way. I always remember before playing rugby or a sports game, you had that pre-game nerves, and if you got it just right, it spurred you on and made you more focused and all that. So don't fight against anxiety, because actually it can help you. You just need to be able to manage it better, and a lot of it's understanding yourself, and just I would say I get it a lot less these days because I've just got techniques and I do stuff like this exercise, eat well. There's stuff that you can do to kind of mitigate it even before it gets to the point where you've got it, and we'll talk about that in future episodes, I'm sure.
Well, it's a nice segue that you keep giving me. You keep giving me these little nuggets of segues. Because next week, our episode 3 is going to talk around positive steps. So next week, we're going to be looking at those things from Chris and I, like what did we do after we'd got our feelings out, spoke to people. What positive steps did we take? Because we're in control of this. You're in control of your own thoughts. You are in control of your own actions. So what did we do to actually help ourselves get better? And that's what we're going to be talking about in episode 3.
Good. I'm looking forward to it.
So that concludes this week's episode. Chris and I would like to thank you for listening. Please subscribe and leave us a review to help our community grow. You'll find links to our social media and any other resources discussed in this episode in our show notes.